Morrowind was one of the best RPGs of the early 2000s. It had excellent quest design, excellent world building, and very nuanced character building and character level up system. The games that followed from Bethesda Studios tried to sort of streamline this process in order to make it more ease of access for new players. As a result, many people felt like the RPG-ness of Morrowind was sort of lost over time. So what happens when an indie developer tries to recreate that magic with their own game and their own world? Dread Delusion looks to be a Morrowind-inspired game that I was able to play during an indie showcase for Steam. It was a demo, it was a very early access demo, and the creators were very clear about that. Dread Delusion is a dark fantasy setting where the Inquisition controls the use of magic and hunts down anyone who worships the gods. Worshipping the gods grants access to different kinds of magics. The first thing you will notice about this game is that it has a very old school art style. It's very pixelated, it's very low resolution textures. It looks more like a PS1 game than it does like Morrowind. I believe that is a very intentional decision by the developer Lovely Hellplace. The game itself has a very nice to look at color palette. It's quite easy on the eyes, and it has this interesting mixture of like the pastel reds and purples with the normal colors that you expect in an RPG, like green and brown for the buildings and wood, and blue for magic and things like that, and red for health potions, so on and so forth. And the game consistently uses color so well. It's actually quite look at when it's standing still. Where I don't like the art style is that every time you move, all the objects in the distance are sort of flickering to adjust. The frame rate for this game is quite bad, but once again, this is an early access game, so I'm assuming if they sort of fix that and they make that much more smoother, it would make the game look very good. I think it's actually quite a pretty game to look at, despite it being so pixelated. This game absolutely reminds me of Morrowind. You start out in a cell and are given a quest. Once you are given this quest, you go out into the world and are able to explore it, to meet different people, to get dragged into these different quest lines and stories and places to explore, very much like Morrowind. What consistently came up in my thoughts as I was playing this game is that it was very well designed. It was a very small map, and looking at these floating islands, you can clearly see that there are fortresses in one, forests in the other. You can tell that there's a world here. There's a world that you can clearly see and that piques your interest to explore. Like many different RPGs, there are stats. One, strength is for your weapon damage, guile is for like your acrobatics and lockpicking, wisdom is for your magic, and persona is for convincing people. And like a well-crafted RPG, there are so many different opportunities for you to use each of these stats. In most RPGs, the problem becomes when do the other non-fighting stats become useful. So wisdom and strength are fairly obvious. You want to build a magic character, you go wisdom. You want to build a sword fighter, you go strength. But how often do the guile and persona skills come up? Early on in the game, I was given a package by a quest giver, and they were a little bit shady about how they gave the package, and you can choose to ask them about it or you could choose not to. Later on in the quest, you get stopped by a guard, and the guard asks you what's in the package, and suddenly I'm like, oh, there's just a package. It's just a package I delivered. And I passed a persona check, which is like your social skills check. And so that came up so early, I was very surprised by that. And in that same quest line, I could have also used the lockpicking skill earlier on, and so on and so forth. Every single stat in this game feels like it is useful and gives new possibilities. It opens up what you can do in the game. Combat is fairly straightforward. You hit people with your sword, you have a light attack, you have a heavy attack, you use up stamina when you fight other enemies, and you can sort of move back and forth to avoid getting hit. The thing about this game that's very noticeable is that it does have a stamina bar, so when you attack it gets lowered, but also the longer you play, the more the maximum amount of your stamina bar goes down, up to half. And this happens really quickly. It happens almost within 30 minutes. Which means that sometimes you feel the pressure to go find a place to sleep almost every 30 minutes you're playing this game. I think that's something they definitely need to adjust. The dark fantasy setting of this game I actually found to be very interesting. Instead of going for the typical old school fantasy of like, oh, there's wizards and goblins and magic and so on and so forth, it's more about beliefs and how they affect what you can do. There are people who believe in these different gods, and therefore they have access to different kinds of magic. The Inquisition controls how magic is used in the world through these machines that are very strange. So you almost have this weird mix between fantasy and steampunk, and it almost feels like it's met directly in the middle. It's very interesting art style. It's a very, very unique art style. Considering this game is an early alpha, early build, I don't want to say too much about the gameplay or how it ran, because it didn't run that great, and I could tell that the trailer footage looks way better than the game footage, and that's just normal for a game in development. For me, the most important part about playing the demo was that I got the impression that this game has a lot of potential. Old school RPG fans, I think, are really going to dig this game. Anyone who likes very dark fantasy, almost a steampunk look, old school mechanics, they're definitely fans of older RPGs, so definitely put this on their radar. They should wishlist this game. It really helps out the developers when we do that. I have it wishlisted. I'm very much going to keep tabs on how this game's going. I want to do a review of it when it finally comes out, and I want to explore this world, find out who, the Clockwork God is, find out why the Inquisition controls magic, find out where the storyline goes, and finally explore these sky islands orbiting a Neuron star.